My sister's outbursts overshadowed my birthdays and sparked community disapproval, teaching my parents a tough lesson about consequences. I'm 20 years old now, but this all unfolded when I was 14. I have a sister who is about 6 years younger than me, and she was excessively pampered by our parents after being diagnosed with high-functioning autism at the age of 4. Aside from that, she appeared quite typical, but she was undeniably spoiled, and she wielded that to get her way almost all the time. By all the time, I mean nearly every single moment. Anything I had, she insisted on having too, which meant we ended up with duplicates of nearly everything that wasn't a shared item. And anything she possessed that I didn't, she made sure to flaunt in front of me. When I was 11, I pleaded with my parents for a 3DS for my 12th birthday. I received one, but I was immediately told that I had to lend it to my sister whenever she wanted, or else it would be taken away from me, which happened frequently. One day, my uncle visited and witnessed my parents forcibly taking my 3DS from my hands to give to my sister. He unleashed a tirade on them for their blatant favoritism. They returned my 3DS right away but then blamed me for the entire situation after my uncle left. However, they didn't make me give it to my sister again. Instead, a few days later, they bought another 3DS as a surprise gift for her. On several occasions, including my own birthday and those of others, my sister threw a massive tantrum because the party wasn't centered around her. She even went so far as to express her disappointment about not receiving any gifts or being allowed to blow out the candles on the cake. My parents learned the hard way that they couldn't enable her the way they wanted at those parties, and they were actually kicked out of a few for trying. As a result, other kids at her school stopped inviting her to birthday parties altogether. For me, my birthdays were some of the only days that were truly about me, as my parents often made my life revolve around my little sister. The year before this story took place, my parents paid more attention to her during my 13th birthday and even asked if I would let her blow out my candles because she was upset and sulking. I refused because I wanted to blow out my own candles. Initially, they called me a spoiled brat until my uncle intervened again, chastising them for their favoritism and pointing out how my sister received nearly everything between us simply because of her autism. My parents received no support from anyone else there, except for my sister, who was still crying because she wasn't getting her way. In her frustration, she even attempted to spit on my cake out of spite, but my uncle thankfully blocked her before she could do it and scolded her until she ran to my mom in tears. The other adults present were not pleased with my parents, and they promised never to ask me to let my sister blow out my candles again. However, they mostly just went through the motions for the rest of the party, with my uncle taking over the coordination from that point on. A couple of weeks before my next birthday, my parents sat me down and informed me that while they would still get me some gifts and a small cake, my birthday party was effectively cancelled to prevent another meltdown from my sister. I couldn't believe they were doing this to me, but they shrugged it off as if it didn't matter. Over the next week at school, I confided in my friends, teachers, and even my school counselor about the situation. Everyone was appalled by my parents' lack of consideration and empathy. The vice principal even found out and offered me consolation. This all made its way back to my parents through social media. They ended up grounding me and gaslighting me for sharing my feelings with so many people. But that didn't stop me from telling everyone at school that I was grounded for being upset about my birthday being cancelled for no good reason. I guess that made things worse because several of my parents' friends, along with the parents of other kids at my school, reached out to them, questioning their actions. Suddenly, I was ungrounded, but I didn't receive an apology. My mom simply walked into my room with her arms crossed, told me my grounding was over, and then left. I assumed my party was still cancelled since no one mentioned anything about it. My sister found it amusing and rubbed it in my face that I wouldn't get to celebrate. However, by the end of those 2 weeks, my parents surprised me with a party at my favorite restaurant, claiming that was their plan all along. I knew it wasn't true. From what I could see, everyone was incredibly unhappy with them for their earlier actions, which was evident in how family members interacted with my parents. They organized the surprise and began wreaking havoc on anything in her path. My parents appeared mentally checked out when I last saw them. My uncle mentioned that they confided in him about wishing they could send my sister to military or boarding school in the future because they felt overwhelmed by the monster they had created. However, they knew they couldn't afford that. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find it somewhat amusing. Edit, wow, this really blew up. I want to thank everyone who commented and gave me awards, it truly means a lot to me. Thank you all so much. For those who read my previous post about how my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday, they were fully aware of my sister's behavior during birthday parties that weren't her own, yet they tried to enable her actions simply because she was high-functioning autistic. This rampant spoiling didn't sit well with anyone outside the family. This particular incident happened when my sister was around 6 or 7 years old. A neighbor girl down the street was having her birthday party, and my sister was invited because they were sort of friends, but likely also because they knew my parents would bring a gift. I don't remember what it was, nor do I care. My parents dragged me along to this party, even though I would have preferred to stay home and play video games. I was bored and sat down almost the entire time, which allowed me to witness the entire situation unfold. It all started when my sister was caught picking up gifts from the table and shaking them. The birthday girl's parents told her to stop, but my parents defended my sister, claiming she was harmless. The birthday girl's mom, however, knew what my sister was really like and insisted that my parents move her away from the presents. There were some games that the kids played, though I don't remember what they were. I do recall that my sister tried to be the center of attention as much as possible. Each game allowed the birthday girl to have the first pick or turn, as it was her special day. My sister, however, freaked out because she didn't get to go first. My parents even asked the birthday girl's parents if my sister could have the first turn, but the mom flatly refused and told my parents to get my sister under control or we would all be asked to leave. When it came time for the cake, the parents lit the candles for the birthday girl, and the adults began singing the happy birthday song. They barely got through singing the birthday girl's name before my sister erupted into a tantrum at the table. She grabbed the edge of the table and started shaking it violently. My parents had to hold her back for a moment, and then I saw them approach the birthday girl's parents again, looking desperate. The poor woman looked utterly disgusted, and I later learned that she had suggested letting my sister blow out the candles first, after which they could redo it. She ultimately told my parents it would be best if we left, and they returned to trying to finish the birthday song. My sister couldn't handle it and ran to the table, shoving the entire cake right into the birthday girl's face. I mean, she literally clotheslined the cake with her arm, sending it flying into that poor kid's face. The room fell silent for a few seconds before a bunch of kids started laughing. The birthday girl began to cry, and the adults were mortified except for my parents. They hugged my sister tightly and acted like entitled parents, claiming this could have been avoided if they had just let her blow out the candles first. The birthday girl's parents were busy cleaning chocolate cake off their daughter and yelled at my parents to leave. The other kids began to cry as it dawned on them that there would be no cake left. My parents started dragging my sister out, but she broke free and pushed over the table with all the presents on it. I grabbed her and held her in a headlock until my parents could catch up. I apologized profusely to the birthday girl's parents, explaining that I wasn't on my parents' side in this matter. Yes, that's right, 12-year-old me had to apologize for my own parents. My mom yelled at me to get moving or I could walk home. I told her I would walk home, which was only a quarter mile down the street. I stayed behind to help clean up the mess my sister had made. The birthday girl's mom thanked me and said I was a good kid, but my sister was just rotten. Someone went out and got another cake while the birthday girl took a shower to clean off the cake. They managed to clean up the mess and redo the birthday song. After the party, the birthday girl's parents wrote something on a piece of paper. It was a handwritten invoice for the destroyed cake, along with a threat to call the police since someone had recorded the entire incident. I handed the invoice to my parents, and they looked furious when parents stood firm, determined to see this through. I was honestly surprised by their resolve, as they had often caved in to her demands in the past. The first few weeks were chaotic, to say the least. My sister would throw tantrums, scream at the top of her lungs, and even break things around the house when she didn't get her way. I remember one day, she threw a plate against the wall, shattering it into pieces. My parents were at their wits' end, but they knew they had to stick to their guns this time. After about a month, something shifted. My sister began to engage in the therapy sessions, albeit reluctantly. The therapist had suggested a reward system for good behavior, but with a twist, my sister had to earn back her privileges and possessions through consistent positive actions and a better attitude. It was a tough pill for her to swallow, but slowly, she started to understand that her actions had consequences. At home, my parents implemented a strict routine and chore schedule for her. Initially, she fought against it tooth and nail. There were screaming matches, broken dishes, and even a few attempts to run away. I remember one instance where she tried to sneak out of the house, but my parents caught her just in time. It was a tense atmosphere, but I could see that my parents were committed to making this work. As the weeks went by, my sister began to show small signs of improvement. She started completing her chores, albeit begrudgingly, and even began to engage in conversations with my parents about her feelings. It was a far cry from the tantrum-throwing child she had been, and I could see the relief on my parents' faces as they realized that their efforts were starting to pay off. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still days when she would regress and throw fits, especially when she felt like she was being treated unfairly. I remember one evening when she was upset because she wasn't allowed to play video games for the rest of the week due to her behavior. She screamed and cried, claiming that it was unfair and that she hated everyone. My parents remained calm, reminding her that she needed to earn back her privileges. One day, I overheard my parents discussing how they felt about the changes. They admitted that they had been in denial for far too long about the consequences of their parenting choices. They expressed regret for not addressing her behavior sooner and acknowledged that they had enabled her for years. It was a moment of honesty that I hadn't seen from them before, and it gave me hope that they were finally taking responsibility for their actions. As my sister continued to attend therapy, she began to learn coping mechanisms for her frustrations. The therapist worked with her on expressing her feelings in healthier ways, and I could see her starting to apply those lessons at home. There were still setbacks, but they were becoming less frequent. My sister even started to apologize when she lashed out, which was a significant step forward. Despite the progress, my sister still had her moments. One afternoon, she had a meltdown over a minor issue: she couldn't find her favorite toy. Instead of resorting to her usual destructive behavior, she came to my parents and expressed her frustration. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental in the grand scheme of things. As the months passed, my parents continued to support my sister's journey. They attended family therapy sessions as well, which helped them understand how to better communicate with her. I could see the change in their dynamic. They were becoming more patient and understanding, which in turn encouraged my sister to open up more. Looking back, I realized that the intervention had been a turning point for all of us. It forced my parents to confront the reality of their parenting and the impact it had on my sister. It also made me reflect on my own role in the family dynamic. I had often felt like a bystander, but now I understood that I could be a part of the solution. As my sister continued to work through her challenges, I found myself feeling more hopeful about our family's future. It was going to be a long road, but I believed that with the right support and commitment, my sister could learn to navigate the world in a healthier way. I was proud of her for taking those first steps, and I was grateful to my parents for finally stepping up to the plate. In the end, I realized that change takes time, and while we still had a long way to go, we were finally on the right path. My sister was learning to take responsibility for her actions, and my parents were learning to be the parents they needed to be. It was a journey, but one that I was willing to be a part of, no matter how challenging it might be. My parents held firm, and slowly, very slowly, my sister began to adapt. One day, I received a call from my mom, and she was in tears, but this time they were happy tears. My sister had completed all her chores for the week without being asked and even helped carry in groceries without expecting a reward. It was a small step, but a significant one. The real test came during a family dinner about 2 months ago when my uncle, the same one who had been so vocal during the intervention, was visiting. As we sat down to eat, my sister actually asked if she could help set the table. The shock on everyone's faces was palpable. My uncle praised her, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister genuinely smile at a compliment instead of just expecting it. Of course, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. Last month, my sister had a meltdown when she wasn't allowed to stay up late on a school night. She broke a lamp and yelled that we all hated her. But instead of caving, my parents calmly enforced the consequences they had established with her therapist. To everyone's surprise, my sister actually apologized the next day, something I had never heard her do before. The most recent development happened just last week. My sister's school called my parents for a meeting. Apparently, there had been an incident in class where another student was struggling with a math problem. Instead of making fun of them or causing a disruption like she might have in the past, my sister actually offered to help. The teacher was so impressed by her patience and kindness that she wanted to let my parents know. When my parents told me about this, I could hear the pride in their voices. It was a strange feeling to be proud of my sister. For so long, she had been the source of stress and resentment in our family, but now, seeing her make these changes, I felt a glimmer of hope. Don't get me wrong, we still have a long way to go. My sister still has her moments, and years of bad habits won't disappear overnight. But for the first time in a long time, it feels like we're moving in the right direction as a family. I've even started spending more time at my parents' house, something I never thought I'd do willingly. Last weekend, my sister and I actually played a video game together without any arguments or tantrums. It was nice. As I write this, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. There's still a lot of healing to be done, both for my sister and for our family as a whole. But for the first time in years, it feels like that healing might actually be possible. It's been 3 years since my last update about my sister's progress. I'm now 23, working full-time as a software developer, and living in my own apartment about 30 minutes from my parents' home. My sister just turned 17 and is preparing for her senior year of high school. The journey hasn't been linear, but the transformation in our family has been remarkable. After that first year of intensive therapy and structure, my sister continued to make slow but steady progress. There were still setbacks, a particularly bad one during her sophomore year when she fell in with a group of friends who encouraged her entitled behavior. For about 3 months, it seemed like we were back to square one. Her grades slipped, she started talking back to our parents again, and the tantrums briefly returned. My parents surprised me by handling it perfectly. They didn't overreact or give in, they simply maintained boundaries and consequences. When she missed curfew, her phone privileges were restricted. When her grades dropped, she lost social privileges until she brought them back up. The consistency was key, something they had never managed during my childhood. Eventually, my sister's new friends moved on when they realized she couldn't get away with the same things they could. There were tears and accusations that our parents were ruining her life, but they stood firm. By the end of that school year, she had broken ties with that group, and her behavior stabilized again. The most telling moment came during my sister's 16th birthday last year. My parents planned a modest celebration dinner at a nice restaurant and a homemade cake. Instead of the extravagant gift she might have expected years ago, they gave her a used but reliable car they had been fixing up together as a project over the previous 6 months. I braced myself for disappointment or comparisons to what her friends received, but it never came. Instead, she was genuinely thrilled because she had put in actual work to help restore the vehicle. She understood its value because she had invested her own time and effort. It wasn't the newest model or the flashiest car, but it was hers in a way that none of her previous possessions had been. My relationship with my sister has evolved in ways I never thought possible.